Welcome back, travelers. This morning I'd like to critique the Western idea of enlightenment, and maybe some Easterners' idea of enlightenment too. It's a scam, man. But let me explain. In martial arts, there's a saying that your journey begins when you reach black belt. Does that discredit all the work you put into getting to black belt? Absolutely not. It incorporates it. And the idea behind it is that from beginner to teacher, from white belt to black belt, you're building the foundations of a system. Foundations that can transcend your system into other systems. Because all systems generally have some things in common, but you're building the foundations of a system. By the time you reach black belt, you've put in years of motion, years of practice, training. And the idea is by the time you reach black belt, you're proficient in the foundations of that system. Now, because in the Shaolin Kung Fu tradition, which has amazing roots if you're not familiar, but something that was taught to me very young was if you train something for 10 years, daily, if you train something daily for 10 years, you'll master that thing. It could be a knife, it could be a sword, it could be nunchucks, it could be drunken boxing, the 8 Immortals, it could be whatever. The Superman punch, the side kick, the jab, the back fist. If you train it daily for 10 years, you'll be a master of that thing, that technique. Because the idea is once you do something so many times, you develop muscle memory. And when you develop muscle memory, you do it instinctually. Some of you may be familiar with Bruce Lee's quote, it's not me that hits, it hits all by itself. It's muscle memory. So what that does is you're no longer learning the foundations, you're no longer learning the techniques. At this point, you've done them so much you just do them, you just react without thought. That frees up your mind now to study these techniques, to examine them, to understand when you use them, when they are effective, when they are ineffective. All those forms traditional martial arts do. This is your time as a black belt to understand what every single motion that you've done for years, what every single motion exemplifies. So if part of the kata movement is this, you're learning it for the first few years, but by the time you reach black belt, you should have done this moment in the form so many times you don't even think about it. What now you're doing is you're studying, oh, this was a knife hand to the carotid artery, or a knife hand to the temple. Or in certain special, systems, like in Shaolin Kung Fu, since I mentioned it, I mean, they have dozens of animal styles and just so many systems within that umbrella. And, you could be talking about, for instance, right here, the Phoenix Eye. When I hit with a jab with the Phoenix Eye, man, I'm hitting somewhere like here at a pressure point here, or maybe I'm going for an eye. Although for the eyes, I would generally do this, right? But you get to examine all your emotions that you've built up into that point. This is what brings you close to mastering a system. Because when you've mastered a system, not only do you know all the techniques, you understand all the techniques to a point where you can instruct others. Does that make sense? Enlightenment is like that. It's not the end goal. Enlightenment is just a point in the road. It's like getting your black belt. Enlightenment means you see through the illusion. And one of the hardest things for modern, I'll just say modern Americans, but people in the West, is that you have to disconnect from the social mind. You have to understand that life is a hamster wheel. You have to see past the illusion of power structures and rulers and CEOs and all these things. You have to see past politics. You have to see past these things and see them for what they are, which is control mechanisms. But once you do see past that, and it could be an experience like the Hindus talk about and the Buddhists talk about, it could be an experience like, ooh, I was enlightened, like, oh, for a moment I understood all things were connected. That's happened to me. After a week of debauchery and degeneracy, I was sitting out on the porch staring up at the sky after pulling an all-nighter. And all of a sudden this like feeling came over me that, and if I were to put it into words, it was absolutely, all things are in their proper place. All things are in their proper place. All things are in their proper place. And I understood at that moment. But here's what no one tells you. I was enlightened when I was born. So were you. After years of indoctrination and years of a world built to tell you who you are, to give you identities, to give you scripts to follow, we forgot who we truly are. And so it is the human experience that after doing the work, you will reach a point where you see through the illusion. You see the social mind for what it is. And you understand that all things are connected. Everything's a spider web. That's where intuition and precognition and all these things come in. Some people are intuitive enough to know when they feel a strand of the web shaking that something's coming. And it's this far off. That's enlightenment. The Buddhists would say you can't separate what's outside your skin from inside your skin. Jesus would say, treat your neighbor as you treat yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Okay, so enlightenment isn't the end goal, and it's not a guy in a bathrobe on a mountain meditating. They could be enlightened, but that's one method of approach. For instance, in the Taoist traditions, what started out as demon hunters and shamans eventually became scientists and priests and philosophers, and there's different schools. There's the lineage school, there's the crazy school, which is what I was a part of. There was temple Taoists that learned in a temple, very akin to like Buddhist monks. There were Taoists who had a mentor, like in a sense of like a small mentorship. There was hermit Taoists who were hermits. I have some experience with all three of these, and there's some that specialized in like me, time and space, because as a martial arts master, all combat is an intimate interaction, and everything you do is relevant to time and space. It's timing and it's spatial distance, timing and distance, space and time. And then eventually I took it to more esoteric studies, which involved me in esoteric practices to understand time and space. But there are other Taoists that they do Chinese medicine. And now look, everybody has a foundation, okay? Everybody that's a Taoist has a black belt, unless they're just like a philosopher who appreciates the Tao Te Ching and the I Ching, maybe, you know, maybe then, no, they haven't studied the foundations of Chinese medicine and everything. But for instance, I have. Do I use it? No, hardly ever. Sometimes I will, but like I incorporate it into my diet sometimes and things like that. But I don't own a shop, you know, where I help people and do that. Other Taoists do. So enlightenment is not, what enlightenment is, if I could put it into words, is being authentic. Once you because it's natural to assume that once you realize everything's connected, you're going to become this cosmic pacifist, like a Buddhist that removes all the worms as they're tilling the garden and preparing the garden, and they'll remove all the worms so that they don't accidentally kill any with the shovel or step on them, which is a very high marker on compassion. And that follows that understanding. So it's natural to assume that you would become this cosmic pacifist. That isn't true, though. What it allows you to see is that every signature is unique and in its proper place. Every signature and what you are authentically, who you are, without other people telling you who you are, without all these identities people have given you, who you really are, your authentic self, is a signature. And that signature, I can tell you, is necessary in this time and space. Which is why, if you look at my past videos, I get very upset over people who identify themselves with like political teams and by their occupations and by their accomplishments. It's like, these are things you've done. These are things you may have believed, maybe still believe, but that's not you. If you're realistic, there's no, in America, there's no like Republican and Democrat that agrees with everything that team says, but they agree with enough where they're like, this is my team. Why not just think for yourself? Why not just be you on every issue? And you may be very different than me, and we may never agree, and that's fine. But why not just be you? These are extra identities, and people tend to start to believe that they are these identities, that they are these things they've done. Okay, that's the illusion. But once you see through that, you know who you are. Like, for instance, I've trained my whole life in martial arts. I have a history of violence, not harming other people indiscriminately, not abusing people. But I have studied the art of violence my entire life, and I applied it on the battlefield. I've applied it in the streets of America for different, and it wasn't because I was drunk and angry or some silly shit like that. It was always on a matter of principle, according to my ethics, my authenticity, what I believe, what I will tolerate, what I will not tolerate. And that's unique to me. The same as it would be unique, your way is unique to you. Okay? That's being enlightened, is being true to your signature. And understanding that we're not all alike, and thank God, because that's what makes the whole thing work. Everything is in its proper place. You know, one of my favorite stories to tell, because, you know, people think because I say, you know, I love the Tao, and I'm a Taoist or whatever, you know, people seem to think that that means I'm like some Buddhist monk, some pacifist Buddhist monk. No. One of my favorite stories is this Taoist master called Matsu. Matsu looked like a homeless person, and his hair was always crazy. And even though he wasn't a big guy, he stomped around town like a bull. That's how he's described. And there was these two people that had a dispute over a cat. Like one family bought the cat, and the other family the cat would go to. So they were like, hey, it wants to be with us. And they had this dispute over who owned the cat. And they brought the cat before Matsu, and they were like, hey, tell us, you know, who should have this cat? The one that bought it, or the people that it wants to be with? And Matsu put the cat down, grabbed a cleaver, and he cleaved the cat in half. And he gave half of the cat to one family and half of the cat to the other. He said, problem solved. Does that sound like a pacifist to you? The Boxer Rebellion, you know, history is filled with Taoists rebelling against the government. That's why the Chinese government throughout history several times has burned the Shaolin temples. Taoists are not pacifists. Some are, others aren't. And that's the way it is. That's the way. Like, and so when you pretend to be something you're not being true to you. You're not enlightened. You know, you have, even in Greek philosophy, the Socrates or his student Plato, but know yourself. Know yourself. Because if you know yourself, then you know how you're going to interact in certain situations. And you can make judgments on to avoid those situations, or hey, I know how I'm gonna act in this situation, so you don't have to hesitate when it's there. Like, and then these creeping thoughts will come in. Okay? Thoughts don't originate just with you. There are external influences, and thoughts will creep in, and you can identify those thoughts as not natural to you because you know who you are. Not what you've done, not who other people told you you are or what you should be, but you truly know who you are and how you fit into this whole thing. That's enlightenment. You see through the illusion, you see through the propaganda, you see through the identities, and you see through the illusion of separation. And once you realize how you're connected to everything, now you can truly be you. So enlightenment isn't the end goal. It's just, it's a waypoint. It's just part of the process. But like a black belt, you don't get a black belt if you never learn the foundations, if you never put in the time, invest the time to become a black belt. Then you'll never be a black belt. And if you never become a black belt, then you can never study and examine the techniques to truly understand your system, which will lead you to be a master. Well, enlightenment is the black belt. You have to put in work to set up things, and then when time and space collide at the right moment, you get it. You see through the illusion. Now you can pretend you didn't and just play the game. That's fine, but you know in your mind you're fooling yourself so that you can play the game. Some enlightened people do that. So they may look not any different than anyone else. But they're not, it's not some end goal where you achieve the secrets of the universe in the sense, this scam that other people have set up. That's not what enlightenment is. It's seeing through the illusion, and then you understand. You can be authentic now. Thanks for spending this time with me, travelers. Next time.